She hadn't said a word in over 200 days. But when 7-year-old Ava walked into that courtroom clutching the leash of her golden retriever, the room didn't know it was about to witness the most unorthodox testimony in legal history. They thought she was just a silent little girl, broken, helpless. But one quiet hand signal changed everything. When the dog stood up, stared across the room, and growled, the judge froze. Was the wrong man on trial all along? No one expected a child to be the star witness in one of the city's most disturbing court cases. But there she was, Ava Bellamy, only 7 years old, entering the grand courtroom in a pale blue dress and holding tightly to a thick leather leash. At the other end of it padded Milo, her golden retriever. The courtroom was full. Journalists lined the back wall. Sketch artists already had their pencils moving. Cameras weren't allowed, but that didn't stop the buzz outside. The case had gripped the nation. Ava's stepfather, Benjamin Clark, was on trial for the alleged disappearance and suspected murder of Ava's mother, Evelyn. There was no body, no confession, no direct evidence. Just one small girl and her silence. She hadn't spoken since the night her mother vanished without a trace. No one had been able to coax a word from her. Therapists, detectives, even relatives. They said it was trauma-induced mutism. But Ava had Milo, a registered service dog trained to comfort children dealing with extreme stress. At first, most assumed he was there just for support. But those who had seen Ava and Milo interact knew something was different. They seemed to communicate in quiet gestures, Ava's tiny hand twitches, small eye movements, barely their motions that somehow led Milo to act. He wasn't just a comfort animal. He was her voice. Judge Emery, a stern but fair man in his early 60s, watched the girl closely from the bench. He'd seen child witnesses before. They rarely held up under pressure. This was something else. Ava sat beside her court-appointed guardian and placed her hand gently on Milo's head. The bailiff swore her in, though no one expected a verbal response. She simply nodded. A ripple of unease moved through the court. This case had no direct evidence. It relied on implication and emotion. And now, on a girl who couldn't, or wouldn't, speak. The prosecutor, Lauren Kim, approached gently. Her tone was soft, maternal even. She asked Ava basic questions. Her name, her age, if she remembered her mother. Ava's lips didn't move. But Milo lifted his head. His eyes followed the attorney. His tail thumped once. Ava's fingers had twitched. Lauren noticed. Everyone did. Judge Emery leaned forward, curious. Lauren asked another question. Did you see what happened that night? Silence. Then Ava looked down. Her hand moved, subtle, small, barely noticeable to the untrained eye. But Milo responded. He turned his head sharply toward the defense table, his ears pinned back. A low growl rumbled in his throat. Judge Emery raised a hand. Is the dog responding to something? He asked. Lauren looked to Ava's guardian. The woman nodded. Ava communicates with Milo through sign. It's not formal ASL. It's something they made up. She uses it when she's too scared to talk. The judge raised an eyebrow. Is that admissible? The courtroom buzzed. The defense lawyer, Aaron Price, shot to his feet. Your Honor, this is outrageous. The testimony of a dog. I'm not admitting testimony from the dog, the judge replied. But I am interested in whether the child is capable of communicating through other means. Proceed. And just like that, the courtroom became a silent theater. All eyes were on Ava and Milo. She made another tiny gesture. 2 fingers tapped against the leash. Milo sat up straighter. A whimper escaped him. Not a bark, not a growl. A sound of distress. Ava looked at Lauren Kim. Her eyes filled with tears. But still, she said nothing. Lauren turned to the judge. Your Honor, I request a short recess. There's someone we need to bring in. A canine behavior specialist. They've worked with Ava and Milo before. They can interpret what's happening. Judge Emery looked down at Ava. For a brief moment, his professional mask cracked. His eyes softened. Granted. This court will reconvene at 1:30. As the gavel struck, the courtroom emptied, but the air felt thicker, like a storm was coming. Outside, reporters scrambled. Inside, Ava whispered nothing, but Milo stayed alert at her side, watchful, waiting. Somewhere beneath that silence, the truth stirred. The courtroom lights were soft, but the air felt heavy as Ava sat back down after the recess. While the judge reviewed paperwork and the canine behavior expert took her seat near the stand, everyone watched the little girl. She sat so still, her hands folded tightly on her lap, her shoes not touching the floor. Her eyes, though quiet, carried weight. Not just sadness, but something else. Something deeper. As the court resumed, Judge Emery asked the expert to introduce herself. Dr. Elena Morris, she said gently, animal behaviorist specializing in trauma response training for service animals. She'd worked with dogs like Milo for over a decade, but something about this case made her uneasy. She looked at Ava, then at Milo, who sat calmly at her feet. He's watching the room, not just sitting, she observed. He's alert. Not protective, but responsive. He's waiting for her lead. The judge nodded. Proceed. As the doctor spoke, the story began to unfold, not through words from Ava, but through the interpretation of behavior and gesture. The first piece came when Lauren Kim asked if Ava remembered the last night her mother was seen. Ava made a small motion with her hand, brushing her fingers over Milo's back. The dog lay down and placed his head on his paws. Dr. Morris leaned in. That signal means hide, she explained. She taught it to him herself. It's part of their game, a coping method. She uses it when something scary happens. She tells him to hide, but he never leaves her side. That means they were both hiding that night. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Lauren gently pushed forward. Did you hear your mother's voice that night? Ava didn't move at first. Then her eyes dropped. She tapped the leash once. Milo lifted his head and made a soft, whining noise. His ears lowered. That means sad, Dr. Morris said. She associates that word with her mother. It means she heard her cry or say something painful. At this point, the courtroom was no longer just listening, they were watching. Every move Ava made mattered. Every reaction Milo gave felt like a word in a language only they could share. Slowly, a picture began to form. Not a complete one, but enough to show that Ava had been present. Enough to prove that she remembered. The pieces fell into place through signs, not statements. But the real turning point in Ava's backstory came when the doctor asked permission to describe a moment from their previous sessions. With the court's approval, she shared a private memory. We were in a therapy room, just Ava, Milo, and me. I asked her if she'd ever been scared at home. She didn't answer. Instead, she crawled under the table with Milo. She made him lie flat, then pressed her hand on his chest and whispered something. I couldn't hear the words, but Milo responded by growling toward the door. Then Ava looked at me and pointed to the mirror behind me. I realized then, it wasn't the stepfather she was scared of. It was someone else. Someone watching. That confession struck the courtroom like a lightning bolt. The defense team exchanged whispers. The judge raised a hand, silencing the room. Do you believe she witnessed the crime, Doctor? Dr. Morris paused. Yes. But more than that. I believe she knows who did it. And she's too scared to say it aloud. Suddenly, Ava turned her head. Her small voice broke the silence for the first time. Just one word. Milo. Then she reached over and stroked his fur. Her eyes locked with Lauren Kim's. No tears. Just silent strength. It was the first sound she'd made in court, and it wasn't testimony. But it was enough. Enough to prove that she was there. Enough to suggest she remembered. And enough to show she was slowly, finally, ready to speak. As the session ended, the judge sat back, his hands steepled under his chin. Something was shifting. The case was no longer about what they could prove with evidence. It was about what a child remembered through fear. And how she had turned that fear into a silent signal, a language, a survival tool. A story no one else could tell, but a dog could answer. The next day, the courtroom was even more packed. Reporters elbowed their way to the front benches. Sketch artists had to fight for space. Something had changed. People weren't just curious anymore, they were invested. Everyone wanted to know what the little girl would do next. Ava walked in holding Milo's leash, just like before, but this time there was a noticeable difference in her face. She looked more aware, more focused. She wasn't just surviving the courtroom. She was studying it. Watching. And the people in the room noticed. Even Judge Emery, who had remained cool and composed, took longer to look away from her. It was as if she had flipped some hidden switch the day before. She had spoken one word. Now, people waited to see what she would do next. The defense team wasted no time. Attorney Aaron Price stood up as soon as court resumed. His tone was calm, but there was something sharp underneath it. He began by questioning the credibility of using a service dog to draw out testimony. "We are entering a dangerous space," he told the judge. "We're not talking about words. We're talking about interpretations of behavior. And interpretations can be wrong." Judge Emery allowed the cross-examination to proceed but reminded the court that they were still exploring whether Ava could communicate in a reliable way. That's when Aaron turned his full attention to the girl. He didn't shout. He didn't sneer. But every question he asked was a push. "Ava," he said slowly, "do you know why you're here?" No response. "Do you understand that the man sitting across from you could go to prison because of what you do or don't say?" Ava's lips stayed sealed. She stared ahead. Milo glanced at her, waiting for direction. Aaron stepped forward. "Isn't it true that no one saw your mother that night except you? Isn't it true that the police couldn't find anything? No body. No weapon. No sign of a struggle?" He paused for effect. "What if this is all just something you imagined?" A quiet gasp rolled through the courtroom. The guardian leaned forward, her mouth slightly open. Milo stiffened. Ava's hand moved. A slow drag of her fingers along his spine. He didn't growl this time. He stood up and faced the defense table, eyes locked on Aaron Price. Not a sound came from him. Just stillness. Controlled. Watching. Judge Emery raised an eyebrow. "Is there a signal being given?" Dr. Morris, seated nearby, nodded. "Yes. That movement is one she uses when she feels threatened. Milo is trained to stand guard." Aaron held up a hand. "I'm not threatening anyone. I'm doing my job." But then Ava did something unexpected. She looked straight at the judge. Her hand reached out, not for Milo, but for a notebook in front of her. She flipped to a page and pointed at a shape, a square drawn in red crayon, with a circle in the center. It made no sense to anyone in the room. But Milo barked once. Loud. Sharp. The sound echoed off the walls. And Ava didn't flinch. Dr. Morris stood. "Your Honor, that shape. It's what she draws when she remembers the hallway in her house. The square is the hallway. The circle is a camera. She says someone was watching. Someone who shouldn't have been." That changed everything. A new piece of information. One that had never been mentioned before. A camera in the hallway. That wasn't in the police report. Lauren Kim stood up. "Your Honor, I'd like to request a recess so we can revisit the crime scene. If there's a camera." Aaron cut her off. "There's no proof the drawing means that. It's a child's scribble." Judge Emery slammed his gavel. "Enough. I'll allow the prosecution to revisit the scene. If there's any truth to this, we'll find out." But Ava wasn't done. She turned back to Milo and gave a different hand signal. A fast double tap to the floor. Milo's ears perked. He turned not to the defense attorney, but to a man sitting in the back row of the courtroom. A man no one had paid much attention to before. A courthouse counselor. He was there for all child witnesses, someone trusted, someone who blended in. Milo let out a low growl, quiet but steady. The man froze. Everyone in the room noticed. The judge narrowed his eyes. "Is there something we should know?" he asked. No answer came. Not yet. But the air had shifted again. The attention had moved away from Benjamin Clark, Ava's stepfather, and toward someone else entirely. Someone hiding in plain sight. And for the first time, the defense attorney looked rattled. Not because of anything that had been said, But because the girl who supposedly couldn't speak had just spoken loud and clear without a single word. The courtroom was silent again as Judge Emery called the session back into order the following morning. The drawing Ava had pointed to, a red square with a circle, was the talk of the city. News reports hinted at a breakthrough. Online threads speculated wildly. But inside the courtroom, the tone was colder. Tighter. Everyone sensed something was about to break open. Ava sat in her usual seat, hands resting gently on Milo's back. He sat up straighter than usual today. His ears twitched at every sound, and his eyes never left Ava. The court-appointed counselor, the one Milo had growled at the day before, was notably absent. The judge explained that the man had taken leave due to health reasons, but nobody believed it. He hadn't said a word when he left the courtroom. Just slipped away. Lauren Kim was ready. In her hands were stills from newly uncovered security footage from Ava's home. The hallway camera, once hidden in a smoke detector, had indeed existed. But the memory card had been removed before the police first searched the home. That memory card had now been found under the floorboards of Ava's bedroom. Wrapped in a hand towel. Hidden deep, but clearly placed by someone who had access. The data was damaged, but some fragments were recovered. Not enough to show what happened in full, but enough to raise questions. In one of the short clips, a blurry figure entered the hallway late at night. Not the stepfather. Not Ava. But a taller man with a limp. A man who wore the same kind of lanyard that court counselors used. The courtroom buzzed. Aaron Price, the defense attorney, stood up to object, but the judge silenced him. "We're not drawing conclusions yet. Let the facts speak." Dr. Morris returned to the stand. This time, she brought diagrams, illustrations of Ava's signals and what each meant. She explained how Milo's responses were trained. They weren't random. They weren't just animal instincts. He had specific actions for specific meanings. When Ava tapped the floor twice, it wasn't just a command to stay alert. It was a warning. Someone bad is close. And that signal had pointed to the counselor, not the accused. The court leaned in as Ava gave another signal. A light brushed down Milo's back, followed by 2 fingers pointed to the gallery. Milo stood. Turned. Then walked, slow, steady, toward the rear of the courtroom. All eyes followed him. And then, something eerie happened. Milo stopped in front of a woman sitting near the back. She was tall, wearing a grey coat and glasses. No one had paid her much attention before. But now Milo sat at her feet and let out a soft bark. Ava had not looked back. She just nodded slowly. Lauren Kim whispered something to the bailiff. Moments later, the woman was asked to step outside for questioning. The judge's face was unreadable, but his hands were clenched tighter than usual. Dr. Morris explained the last gesture Ava had made before Milo moved. "It's one she only uses when she recognizes a voice," she said. That woman might have spoken to Ava before. Maybe on the phone. Maybe in the home. But Ava remembers. And Milo confirmed it. As Ava sat quietly, Judge Emery looked down at her with a mix of confusion and awe. "Does she remember anything else?" he asked. Ava's guardian leaned in and whispered. "She's remembering everything. But it's like she's building the picture one piece at a time." Lauren nodded. "She's not just scared. She's cautious. Every signal, every moment, she's making sure she's safe before saying more." The judge paused. Then he asked Ava directly, "Are you ready to say what you saw?" Ava looked down. Then at Milo. She made a slow, small circle on his paw with her finger. He licked her hand, then lay down. It was a code. A new one. One even Dr. Morris didn't recognize. But Ava smiled slightly for the first time. Not a big smile. Just a whisper of one. Enough to make the judge blink twice and lean back. She was almost ready. And everyone in that room could feel it. The truth was close. But she needed one more piece. It started quietly, as most shocking moments do. The 5th day of the trial began with a strange tension in the air. Ava walked into the courtroom with the same calm pace, Milo steady at her side, but this time her eyes didn't search the room like before. She walked with focus, with purpose. She already knew who she was going to look at. The courtroom had become a stage, And this little girl who hadn't spoken more than a single word was directing the show in her own silent way. The judge noticed it first. He leaned forward in his seat. The court officers seemed more alert. The media, already lining the back walls, sensed something was about to happen. After the usual formalities, Lauren Kim stood up and began slowly reviewing what had come out so far. The missing footage. The service dog responses. The growing list of unexplained reactions from Ava. And the unexplained behavior of the courthouse counselor who had vanished without a trace. But then she did something unexpected. She pulled out a folder marked private and approached the judge. She handed it over without speaking. The judge flipped through the contents, his eyebrows rising slightly. He handed it back and gave a subtle nod. Lauren turned to face the courtroom. There is someone here today we haven't heard from, but they've been in this room every day. Quiet. Observant. In a position of trust. A pause fell over the court. Ava's hand moved. A soft pat to Milo's chest. Then she traced a half circle on his back and tapped the floor once. It was a brand new signal. One no one had seen before. Milo's reaction was immediate. He stood, turned, and walked, not to the defense table, not to the back, but to the side of the courtroom. And there he stopped. In front of Dr. Genevieve Warren, Ava's court-appointed therapist. The room froze. Dr. Warren blinked, then shifted in her chair, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. "Is there something I can help with?" she asked, her voice low. Lauren stepped forward. "Ava has just given a very specific signal. This signal has only been seen once before, during a private session, when Ava was asked about who she was most afraid of." The therapist looked around. "That's absurd. I've been helping this child for months." But Dr. Morris stood up from her bench. "No, you haven't," she said plainly. "You've been coaching her. She told me through Milo's cues that someone was giving her bad signals, not hurting her physically, but training her to stay quiet. To act like she didn't know." Lauren walked toward Ava, kneeling beside her. "Ava," she said softly, "was it Dr. Warren who came into your house that night?" Ava looked down. Her hand shook. She didn't answer with words. But she gave the same double tap Milo had responded to earlier. And Milo turned toward Dr. Warren again. This time he growled. Not loud, but firm. A growl that came from deep in his chest. Everyone in the room heard it. The judge raised his voice. "Dr. Warren, I'm going to ask you to remain seated. You are not under arrest, but you are now part of this investigation." The therapist's face went pale. "You can't be serious." But then Lauren brought out a second folder. Inside were reports, digital footprints. A court clerk had discovered that someone had used their credentials to access sealed footage from Ava's home weeks before the police found the memory card. Those credentials belonged to Dr. Warren. She had used them to view files, then claimed she never saw them. She'd also accessed Ava's school files, phone records, and even old therapy notes from another state where Ava's mother once lived. And that's when it hit everyone. This wasn't just a story of abuse or trauma. This was about control. Dr. Warren had inserted herself into Ava's life long before the trial began. She had recommended herself as Ava's therapist when the case was first assigned. She had pushed for Ava to testify, knowing full well what Ava might say. But what she hadn't counted on was the dog. Milo wasn't just trained to comfort. He was trained to detect patterns, emotions, reactions. And over months, he had picked up on Ava's signals, especially the ones she didn't even know she was giving. With every hand twitch, every nervous rub, Milo was building a silent case. And Ava had been trying to tell someone all along. But no one had listened, until now. The courtroom exploded into chaos. Bailiffs moved forward. Dr. Warren tried to speak, but her voice cracked. "She's lying," she said, pointing at Ava. "She doesn't understand what she's doing." But she was wrong. Ava understood perfectly. The final day of court was quiet in a different way. Not the tense, anxious silence that had filled the room before. This time, it was a stillness built from understanding. From truth. The storm had passed, but no one was celebrating yet. The room was full again. Press, families, strangers who had followed the trial from the beginning, but they all sat like they were waiting for something sacred. Ava entered through the side door, hand in hand with her guardian, with Milo calmly walking at her side. The dog didn't seem alert anymore. He looked relaxed, but focused. Like he understood it was almost over. The judge, the attorneys, even the bailiff seemed to recognize that this moment would not be about law or argument. It would be about something more human. Judge Emery leaned forward. "Before we conclude, is there anything the witness wishes to share?" he asked gently, not expecting an answer. Ava sat down in the same chair she had used all week. She looked at the judge, then to Milo. Then she did something she hadn't done before. She removed a folded paper from her pocket. It was crumpled, like it had been held many times. Her guardian nodded, and Ava opened the page and laid it on the table. A drawing. Just a simple one, of a girl, a golden dog, and a woman holding the girl's hand. Next to them was a small red heart. Lauren Kim stepped forward. "Ava, did you draw this?" Ava nodded. Then she did something no one expected. She stood up. Slowly. Carefully. Then she turned to the judge. "I saw her," she said. Her voice was small, but clear. "I saw her do it." Gasps filled the courtroom. She didn't say Dr. Warren's name, but everyone knew who she meant. The weight of those 5 words fell on everyone like a wave. Not because they were dramatic, but because they were real. Ava had finally found her voice. And no one had to guess what she meant. She wasn't just pointing blame. She was letting go of what she'd been holding in for months. The trauma. The confusion. The fear. Judge Emery sat back in his chair. He didn't speak right away. He just looked at Ava, then at Milo, and then slowly nodded. "Thank you," he said. Just 2 words, but they carried a depth that didn't need explaining. After a pause, he turned to the room. "This court has heard enough. The evidence, the behavior, the witness, taken together, they leave no doubt. Charges against Benjamin Clark are dismissed. A new investigation into Genevieve Warren will begin immediately." There was no cheering. No applause. Just a slow breath that seemed to pass through every person in the room. Benjamin Clark, seated at the defense table, broke into tears. Not loud ones, but quiet, stunned ones. He looked at Ava, not with anger or expectation, but with a deep, painful sorrow. Ava didn't look back. She simply leaned down and hugged Milo, her arms wrapped tight around his neck. Outside, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. But inside, something much deeper had settled. The truth hadn't come in a single explosion. It had come in pieces, through stillness, gestures, growls, and finally, a voice. Milo stood at Ava's side as they left the courtroom, stepping into the sunlight. But just as they reached the door, Ava turned around and looked up at the judge one more time. "Other kids have dogs too," she said. "They just need someone to watch." Judge Emery stared at her for a long moment. He didn't reply. He just nodded again and wrote something in his notebook. No one ever found out what he wrote that day, but rumors say he changed the way he handled child witnesses forever after that trial. The news cycle moved on, but Ava's story stayed. It sparked changes in how courtrooms dealt with trauma. It raised questions about the quiet voices that never got heard. But there was one part of the story that never made the papers. A letter found in Dr. Warren's home, addressed to Ava's mother, written months before she disappeared. It never said exactly what was going to happen, but it hinted at obsession, at control, at removing obstacles. The system had almost missed it all. But Ava didn't. And neither did Milo.